So welcome everyone. Welcome to the sixth edition of our famous Fluid Hangout. Fluid Hangout is an informal strategy session with entrepreneurs, and like I said, it's our sixth edition. And today we'll be talking about a very, very interesting subject, which is the subject of moving your business online and financing it. Our hope is that we will be able to um, take a look at, what it entails moving your business online and what are the financing options, and also um, what are the risks that are associated with that, and how do we mitigate such risk. Um, Before I introduce our guest speakers, I would like to say that I would like to also throw more light on why we came about the topic for today. So in our last edition, we had a conversation around COVID and how businesses can navigate through crisis period. Now, during that session or that edition, there was a poll, and the poll, some of the questions that were asked was if businesses were affected by COVID, and almost 98 or 97% of the attendees stated that their businesses were affected by COVID. Then we went further to ask what area of business was affected, and the largest portion of those who responded admitted that their businesses were affected their revenue was affected and their sales were affected, which is pretty much a no-brainer in doing a correlation between those two. Now, the last portion of it was, what does your business need right now? The largest portion of our respondents admitted that finance and tech were their major issue. Now that helped us to narrow down to why sales were affected and why tech and finance were the things that people needed the most. So which gave rise, or gave, I beg your pardon, gave birth to the conversation we are having today. So I think we'll just jump right in, just to give you a sense of how today's edition will flow. I'll be introducing our guests. I'll give each of them about 5 minutes to make a quick introduction and taking into consideration the topic for today. And afterwards, after the 5 minutes opening remarks, then we will ask specific questions, and then we'll move on to Q&A. We're hoping that we'll be able to wrap this up between now and 4:30. We are hoping not to get to 4:30, but we will do our best to keep to time. So once again, welcome. The Fluid Hangout is brought to you by Smith's Work Limited and Lead Space, owners of, I beg your pardon, Lead Space, Passion Incubators, owners of Lead Space. They rent out co-work space. So if you're looking for a co-work space, do reach out to them. My name is Kayode Ajayi Smith. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Smith's Work Limited. And this was made possible by a team of people in collaboration with Lead Space. I'd like to thank the team that was involved in putting this together. Chidima is here. Damilola is here, Kelvin is here, and Sheun is here. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Now, to get started, I'd like to do a quick introduction of our guest. I'll start with the foreigner uh, amongst the three speakers so that I don't marginalize him. So I'd like to introduce Jeremy Gray. Jeremy Gray is a senior engagement manager at the Center for Financial Regulation and Inclusion based out in Cape Town, South Africa. Jeremy, it's nice having you. Hey, Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Cody. It's
sure.
a pleasure.
Sure. You might want to increase your audio so that we can hear you better. Okay.
Okay, sure. I might need to speak louder.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeremy. So I will also like to introduce my very good friend, Peter Ukonu, who is the Chief Technical Officer at Qatar Consulting Limited based in the United Kingdom. Mr. Peter, you're welcome.
Yeah, hi. Just to be correct, Qatar is based in Nigeria.
Oh, apologies. I thought it was based in the UK. I apologize. Okay. And lastly, but not the least, I have Mr. Babajide Asegbeloyin. I hope I pronounced it well. Mr. Babajide Asegbeloyin is the team lead tech space ecosystem business of the First City Monument Bank Limited in Nigeria. Mr. Babajide, it's great to have you here.
Thanks a lot, Kayode, and thank you for organizing this. So thank you. I'm excited being here, hoping to learn from every other person. Thanks.
Fantastic. So, so let's just get started. I will, open the floor for our speakers to make a quick, should I say, opening remarks regarding the subject matter of discussion. And I'll let you go first, Jeremy. Just give us a quick opening, 5 minutes, like a quick remark on your perspective to this conversation.
Great. Thank you, Cody, and thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this discussion. I am very excited to learn from everyone on the call. Maybe a very brief introduction to us. I work at CENFRI. We're a nonprofit think tank based in Cape Town, and our main focus is on opportunities to encourage digital transformation and financial inclusion across the developing world, with a particular focus on Sub-Saharan Africa, given obviously that's where we're based. And so I'm really excited about this discussion. I think it pushes me a little bit beyond our sort of traditional discussions of speaking a lot to FSPs, to actually speak here more with some of you, I think, as small business owners. And I think COVID-19 has really highlighted some of the challenges to the economic system within which we currently operate. A lot of our work is with financial service providers and with regulators and government policymakers. So we try and look both at the individual level and at the system level. And I think some of the things that are really important to try and understand in the face of COVID-19 is, and with respect to the topic that we're discussing here is, how do we understand risk, and what are the roles of different players within the ecosystem to playing that role to understand risk. I work quite a lot with insurers, and I think it will be quite interesting to hear everyone's opinion on this call of how useful insurance is a tool currently for SMEs in Nigeria, because our take is that it's really not something that's delivering value to small enterprises across the continent. And what that requires is a fundamental rethinking of how we think about risk, how we think about sharing risk between different players in the economy. And I think that as much as there's a big role here for regulators and FSPs to play, I think individual SMEs and the associations that you're part of can play a major role in pushing market players to actually deliver the products that offer you real value. And then I think the other key theme that I'm really interested in discussing today is the implications of digitalization. So COVID-19 has clearly led to significant movement of digitalization of business processes, moving your operations online, but also a significant shift towards digital marketplaces. And I think that this is not something that's new, right? This is something that we've seen happening over the last couple of years, significant trend towards online digital platforms throughout the world. And I think COVID-19 has accelerated that trend substantially, but it comes with significant risks as well. It comes with increased risks of cybersecurity, increased risks related to opportunities and access to coping mechanisms in the face of a major crisis like COVID-19. So I think maybe I'll stop there for now, Cody, but I'm very interested to hear what everyone has to say on particularly on those two topics.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Mr. Asegbeloyin, I think I'll let you go next. So, I mean, give us a sense of your thoughts on the subject of discussion, just like an opening comments before we start asking specific questions.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, Kayode. And I think Jeremy has sort of made my job easier because it touched on very important areas that COVID-19 has brought to bear, which is areas around the risk assessment, vis-a-vis insurance, the impact of digitization, and the general dynamics that comes with uncertainty. And I think Jeremy has done a very fantastic, has done a very fantastic job in creating a prelude to our engagement. But what I'm going to say, in addition to what he has shared, is from my perspective as someone that drives my financial institutions' engagement with what I refer to as the technology and innovation ecosystem, which consists of incubators, accelerators, tech startups, government agencies that support innovation, and this entire structure. What I believe that COVID-19 will do, and we gradually see it do, is that several of our small and medium-scale enterprises would gradually evolve into clearly technology-driven businesses because their survival is going to be based out of it. Gone are the days where digitizing your process is a lottery. So digitizing your process is just going to be the norm. I do remember a good quick example, and I'll stop there, is I like sharing real examples, is the store where I buy groceries, I remember then that I raised, this was before COVID-19, I raised two things from them. So every day I went to buy groceries, it was clear that they didn't have a system in which they kept the data of their frequent customers. So every time I went there, there was no sense as if I've been there before. It's as if every time I come there, it's a new, other than the security guy that just greets me, Mr. Jide, welcome. There's really no clear picture to say, okay, you've been here before. The last time you came, you bought oil, you bought cabbage. Do you want cabbage again? And secondly, what I noticed also was that there was no mechanism for me to sort of order grocery from the office or my house. So to them it was luxury. They felt all they could offer was them, was for me walking into the store. And then COVID came. And when COVID came, they had the challenge. They had stock, and there was a period where the government relaxed curfew. So if they had been keeping data of people like myself, they would have called me to say, Mr. Jide, we are open for 2 hours. We know you buy cabbage. We know you buy this. Would you like to order it via telephone call? Then our delivery will deliver it, So they didn't have that. So where I'm going to is this era has by default accelerated digitization. So any SME that is thinking positively and is thinking to be resilient must find a way by which it embraces some form of digitization. So yes, so that's how I would like to introduce this conversation. We can talk a bit about the financing part once people start asking questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Babajide. Mr. Peter, it's your turn. You are the you are the center of the attraction today. So could you give us an opening?
I hope not. I hope
not. So give us an opening, please.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah, hi everyone. Just like I mentioned earlier on, I'm based in the UK, city of Qatar, but Qatar is still a company based in Nigeria. I'm going to be speaking generally from my conversation earlier with Kayode. Just going to be advising generally about some answers I have, a lot I don't have. I'm going to be talking about why do we digitize. I would try to give some reasons why I think digitizing is important. One would be it helps save time. It saves time in the sense of people making orders and all of that. It helps avoid disasters. Once you have your inventory in such a way that you can always manage what you have left, what you've sold for the day, it just helps you avoid a lot of things that you probably would never have known of if not for a system at least to be able to manage all of that. I've spoken with a lot of friends who have stores, especially in Nigeria, because of the trust system that we have. Today they have 3 items, they reconcile 1, 2 are missing, and then it's always a problem. They tend to fire people and do all of that. Digitizing just makes it a bit easier to manage such things. It also helps flexibility. It increases flexibility a lot. I'll talk more about that. It helps streamline your operations. It's something that will also increase customer efficiency. When you have a digital system where customers will always send emails or have a chat system where they can always find out what's going on with their products or service that you're offering them, it just increases that customer facing thing. It will save you money in the long run, and it will also help you really scale. It will help you scale really, really well going forward. And then I'll talk about the what. I think once you want to go digital, some things that a lot of people have. I've had several people calling me just off the blues. Can you help us do this? Can you help us do that? And I'm like, I wouldn't just jump into those things until I can see some kind of, you would know when a company is going to do well when you see their brand. First of all, if you want to be digital, you should have you should have a brand identity. That's something that's important. You should also think about growing organically. I see people, always want to jump into advertising, jump into Facebook to advertise and all of that. But there's also the thing about growing organically. There's a lot of the few where you just have few people who then attract other people. You want your products to speak for itself and not just impressions on people's faces all the time. And then yes, there's definitely a place for advertisement. I think that it's always the time for that. You want to first test, once you start growing. And then I'll just talk about how we want to do everything I've mentioned so far. First of all, you need to identify your product. A lot of people are selling products that they don't know what they're selling, what product that they're selling is. And that's the truth. But you need to identify your product first. By that, what I think people need to do is that they need to also think disruptively. When I mean you need to identify your product. People tend to have products that they've seen other people do. They feel it's working, so they just want to do it. So that's not what you should do. You should always think about what problem you're trying to solve first, and then create products and services to be able to solve that problem. You need to identify your demographic. Do some kind of analysis of the people you want to sell to. Where do they stay? what do they do, what's the agenda, when are they active, what times are they active, is it what you're doing, is it a night business or is it a day business, what kind of things do they like, and how much can they afford. The truth is that no matter how we look at it, not everybody needs to go digital. Again, let me reiterate, or let me rephrase that. Not everyone needs to go digital in the complete sense of going digital. By that I mean, you don't need to sell online. If your demographic are people who predominantly are going to be wanting to have for instance, those that sell luxury goods, it's very, very difficult selling luxury goods online. People want to see what they're buying. I know in Nigeria, we like a lot of, we buy luxury furniture. I doubt anybody's going to be buying a 5 million naira luxury furniture online. They want to go to the store and see physically and then pay for it. But there's so many other things that you can also sell, online that people don't want to travel to go and do. And you can see some businesses in Nigeria that have really started making waves in those areas. Yeah. So you need to identify your demographic and not just jump into this because it sounds nice. Then another thing I also like to advise is that it's also good to start small. I mean, really, really small. There's no need just jump in and invest in everything you have. So what I do is, so there's something we do in software development. It's a methodology called Agile. So what it does is that you iterate really quickly, small iterations, and then you go continuously in very little loops so many times. So what you want to do is that since you don't know the complete formula about what you're selling or the best way to be able to push that out, instead of putting all in, what I would advise is to go iteratively, do it in small loops, short loops, and then just do it multiple times until you get that very right. Until you're able to fine tune it to get that right balance between everything. So that's very important. Also, you want to get opinions of your customers. One thing I found out is that people think that business is about them. The business is not about you. It's about the customer that you are selling to. So you want to find out from your customers what they really want. So you want to find out from your customers what they really want, and then try to fine tune your businesses for them. Sorry about that. Now the next thing to do also, from everything I've mentioned, so the way to be able to I think you need to start with is your brand. So when you've identified all of this, you want to build your brand, and your brand is simple. It could start with something like a logo, just a simple logo, a few brand assets, just so when people hear about what you do, or when people see your brand, they can actually identify your brand with what you actually do, and then you can now move on from there. I think I'll stop for now. Maybe when the questions come, I can jump into that. Yeah, Kanye.
Yes, thank you for that summary. You even went into my own space. No, just kidding. But that was a good intro. So let's get into the meat of the matter. So you started off by talking about brand, the few steps before people start thinking of going online, and you talked about the different iterations. So for folks in the house, I'm trying to. And this is not me belittling anybody. I always try to, how can I put it? I always try to simplify, some of these terminologies. So iteration is the different changes to your business idea. So you're changing it now. You change it bit by bit. You try this idea. You improve it a little bit, you move on to the next. Am I speaking your mind, Mr. Peter?
Yeah, that's absolutely what I mean.
You're tweaking it here and there, you're tweaking it here and there until you fine tune it and find the best blend that fits your customer's requirement. So having said that, Mr. Peter, could you give us like a full picture of what it means to go online? So let's take, for instance, a small business. Let's say a business that serves like that supermarket that Mr. Babajide mentioned. How do they go online? Because I recall that during the COVID, I wasn't in the country, so I was stuck somewhere else. And the interesting thing is there's a shop where I buy pizza, and those guys will send us text messages. They'll tell us that you don't need to come into the store. We will drop it at the entrance. You just order, you drop it at the entrance. They know how much you spent the last time. They know what you ordered the last time. They will just ask, is this same order or, you know, a different order? And, you know, and then they have all your details and they send you text messages and thank you also for supporting their business through the period of COVID-19. So in our own case here in Nigeria, how do we solve, I mean, could you give us a, you know, just a good picture of how a business like that Mr. Babajide described, how does that business move online?
Okay, yes. So I'll just outline a couple of things. So going digital, first of all, you need to identify your inventory, identify your inventory and services, list them out, make it very clear. You also want to itemize, clearly state who your existing customers are. First of all, you will need to understand what tier of business you have. Is it B2C, is it B2B, or is it both businesses and customers that you actually reach out to? So I think that's the first place to start. So once you identify your inventory and customers, then you can then move from there into the next step. The next step, you know, from doing that, I had mentioned the brand, you know, build your logo, put some colors together, you know, ask opinions of people to just see exactly, you know, the right, you know, what you think is more captivating. Because you'll be surprised how far a simple logo or a name of a business can actually go in selling that company or selling that product. The next thing that a lot of people don't, well, it's changing now, but you find out smaller businesses in Nigeria take it for granted, is having a website. A website is as simple as gives you some kind of legitimacy. It, you know, it legitimizes what you do because people can actually go and see, you know, read more about your company. There's just so much you can tell somebody when they see it, but when they have to, when you give them a card that just has a website, they can go on their own and then look at what, you know, what you do in detail. It doesn't take a lot to have a website. And one thing I would also like to mention here is that while you build your website, be careful not to lose your brand identity. Think about your colors, your fonts, your styles. There should be some kind of consistency throughout. It has the kind of, it somehow sticks in the customer's mind when they can see that consistency throughout. So if you think about the big brands, that's how they all started. You know, if you look at Microsoft, Google, they have the same colors and you see those colors appear everywhere. A good one I'd like to mention is Apple. You know, from their devices to the websites to their, you know, applications, everything just looks, you know, in a certain kind of way. Then once you've done that, you know, part of what I mentioned about iterations is you can begin to start testing out this by using the existing customers you have, which is why I said it's key to identify your existing customers, those loyal customers. Existing customers doesn't necessarily have to be, like, especially for very small businesses, existing customers can be your family members. Don't think that you're doing the wrong thing if it's just your family members that are your existing customers. It's absolutely fine. You can begin to get some kind of feedback from them because they're actually customers no matter what. Yes, they might have some kind of leaning towards supporting you a bit more, but I mean, there's something that you can always get from them. In terms of now jumping into reaching out to these customers, there are a couple of tools you can use. The tools will match what you're trying to do. First of all, email marketing. What do you want to use for email marketing? You can go and research MailChimp or SendGrid. Those are marketing tools that you can use to reach out customers, again, existing customers that you might have. I wouldn't think you should just send it to everyone. You want to start with a very small sample size and then grow from there. Why did I say that? Because the right communication is key. You could just send it everywhere if you feel that was okay, and then people will just spam your email and they never get any communication from you again. So you want to start small and then, you know, get some kind of feedback call them beta customers, get some kind of feedback from them to see if the communication was right, you know, the right font, the right choice of phrases and tenses, if it's fine. So that's around email marketing and pushing out your products via emails. The next thing you want to do, I think that's okay to do after that, if you feel comfortable where you are at the moment, will be to use tools for having your products being able to, you know, some kind of e-commerce online. There are tools you can also check. You have Shopify. I'm aware Shopify works in Nigeria. I don't know about Wix. There's WooCommerce, there's Magento. I think a lot of them have started integrating with Nigerian payment platforms. You can begin to play around with some of those. So these are just e-commerce platforms where you can put in your products and services, you know, your inventory, like I mentioned before. and people can begin to make payments for it, and then you have the item shipped to them. Again, I know these are fancy tools. I don't advise people to just jump into them. I always like people to start with a small sample size before they get there, but it's just good for you to know exactly. It's always good to have a long-term plan. So if you are able to research them and see exactly how they work, you can begin to think, towards that. Now, you don't have to use any of these commercial tools I've mentioned. You can build yours from scratch. You can build your own website from scratch and sell. But again, for a small business, that is not a very good thing to do, because you do that, you might have issues from security of customers' data to just to make 1,001 things that can just go wrong. So you may be better off working with platforms that have already already exist and have been tested and trusted for a long time. Also, one of the things that you want to also do in this regard as well is you need to also build some kind of. So we've mentioned the website. Another free thing that you need to do is have your business address on Google. It also helps when people can search on Google, see your business address, know where it is, and then people can begin to even leave some comments, some comments in there. You begin to get ratings, that way, and the rest. Those again helps legitimizing your online presence and your business as a whole. It also somehow builds your brand. Think about it. If you want to buy clothes from one company on one hand that does not have any of this, and you want to buy from another company on another hand where you can actually see all of this information, it builds your trust on the second one. So yeah, that's it. The second one, the other thing I want to mention outside just going digital is, I've spoken about growing organically. One way to grow organically is to start, again, we don't do that a lot in Nigeria, but build some kind of customer loyalty scheme. One way to do this is through referrals, or getting customers to do referrals and discounts. So a customer brings 2 people, for instance, they can get a referral, or they can get some kind of coupon towards their next purchase, of your product. So those are ways that you can think about trying to grow your customer base, because your customer base is key, especially if you're selling a product or service that has some kind of reputation where customers will always come back, to you. So you want to start pushing some of those things out more. Social media is also a huge one for everyone. I really don't think you should be having any business if you're not on social media these days. You want to also be out there where you have, your products and services, out there. People can reach you out through social media platforms. They can ask for prices. You can clearly advertise your website links on all the social media platforms. And you want to constantly engage with people, through that. Then if you are comfortable enough, why not? You can move into advertising online, social media ads, Google ads. You can begin to do that. Again, I don't encourage people to do that at very early stage. I think you should go to a level, before you do that. Now, in terms of receiving payments online, especially with this, right now that we have restrictions in movement and all of that, while Shopify, Wix, and WooCommerce are good, you can even start smaller by having a simple link. Paystack has a funds receiver link. You can just create a link on Paystack where people can make payments to you without you having to have a complete website. So people just go to that, that link, and then you can receive payments on it. So you want to research, that. I think it's pretty much one of the quickest way these days that you can actually receive payments online without having to have a full-blown website or proper API integration into your website and things like that. I think that way also works. Again, it's all about starting small. I know of all the numerous challenges in Nigeria, things like for items where you need to deliver, you have security risk, even of the delivery staff, themselves. There's a risk that's posed to them because you don't know who you're delivering to. There's also the risk there's also the challenge of very poor addressing system in Nigeria. Whereas outside, other countries have a proper postcode system, proper addressing system. In Nigeria, a lot of places don't even have any address in the first place. So it's even impossible to reach out to them. We know of the issues with electricity, and logistics is also a nightmare. If you want to maintain your dispatchers, it's a nightmare. I think that there are companies, I know about companies in Lagos these days that you can actually have, you can partner with logistics dispatch riders. So they have the dispatch riders. You just have to worry about hiring them to dispatch your items to your customers. I think that is a better route to follow, especially while you're starting. And then if you get comfortable to a level, why not? You can have your own dispatchers at some point. So yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot. You covered quite a number of things. So I won't attempt to do a summary of what you've just done, but it was a lot. So I will go on to Jeremy and Mr. Babajide. I'll start with Mr. Babajide. Because of the fact that you work within the tech space, you mentor a couple of, all these accelerators and these tech startups. I was going to ask you, what do you think is the cost of all this? Mr. Peter has, elaborated on a whole lot of stuff right now. And I just wanted to ask, what is the cost of all this? And it's the same question I'll be asking Jeremy, because Jeremy is looking at risk. There's a cost to that. So what's the cost of all this, Mr. Babajide?
How I'm going to approach this is in two classes. So there's the cost of change. So the willingness of the business owner to change. Then of course, you might now move on to what you refer to as the regular financial costs that may come to bear. But like Peter did mention, and I would also mention to say that when businesses are being digitized, the first step is a mindset change. A mindset change. And I gave the example of the store during the COVID lockdown period when the government was opening and shutting down and easing the lockdowns. I gave an example of that store because that store in question, first of all, could have started with as something little as documenting the information of people who come in just with a simple Excel form or a simple Excel document, So once I come in, what's your name, Mr. Babajide? They take your name and, so where I'm going to is that there must be a culture of deliberate change by businesses. So this change should include reliance on data. So how can I capture customer data? Because at the end of the day, part of what digitization does for you is it enables you to manage your customers' data much more efficiently and effectively. So data management. So your own data, that is your own stock. So how do you manage your stock? So are you able to transition from just the regular writing items on using pen and paper to ensuring that it is saved on a simple Google form, for example? So the cost of change is the willingness of the owner and the promoter of the business to move from their old way of doing things to a much more updated way of doing things. I can tell you that based on the several engagements, so for my years as a product manager in electronic payments and collections and seeing even SMEs get digitized, you see a challenge with the promoters of the business being used to a certain way of doing things. So the first thing we must push, and I think COVID-19 has just made it easy and accelerated it, there has to be the willingness of the promoters of the business to embrace change. COVID-19 has forced that change. Then the second thing is, which is close to this, would be knowledge. So what this means is that in addition to the promoter of a business having interest in digitizing its processes, the promoter of the business must be willing to either hire people that have the digital first mindset, or be willing to create a structure that would encourage people who join his or her business, to have that digital first mindset. So those are the two things, So let me just recap. I said the willingness to change from the promoter, the willingness of the promoter to hire people that have a digital mindset, and the willingness of the promoter to even train his or her employee that may not have the digital mindset. The other thing that I would mention is around the cost layer. Today, there are free tools that you can use to start on the journey. So receiving payment via Paystack, for example, or Flutterwave, you are not going to pay an onboarding fee. So payment will only occur when someone pays through that link, and you can either, find a way to push the costs to the payer, or you as the merchant, decide to bear the cost. Are you with me? And I think the last part would be that, of course, because of the infrastructural challenges that we suffer in Nigeria, recently in my area, I've been having some challenges with internet, which is one of the reasons why I decided not to connect to the video, because I know that if I do connect to the video, it will affect the quality of the audiovisual conversation. So the challenge around the infrastructure and power, infrastructure, that's data, internet, and power, electricity, cannot be pushed aside. So these two are, for me, the major cost components that a good number of these business always think about, to say, okay, if I'm to run my business on a digital first premise, then I must incur some costs. So maybe I must have Wi-Fi in my shop or in my office to be able to keep data, to be able to access some internet-based resource. And I must also have power to ensure that I am connected to the internet as always. So these two areas may be the high-end point of costs. But I make bold to say that a good number of our businesses today are already spending time on social media. So social media has opened our eyes to see that, to a large extent, Nigerians can burn some money on data. So I've been to Lagos Island Market with some few ladies, and you'll be surprised that with the advent of Chinese branded, what I'll call non-future phones, it has fastened and accelerated people embracing it. So with Techno, itel, all these non-feature phones that are a bit affordable for low-income earner and middle-tier earners. You can see that these classes of mobile devices have sort of made it easier for all these small businesses to embrace the internet. And the last thing I would just say is to say that I think social media has provided a gateway by which businesses have seen the reality and the importance of moving online. So even businesses that don't have websites sort of have some presence on Instagram, So the people selling stuff, they showcase what they sell on Instagram, and they put their phone number, which in turn is usually a WhatsApp line, and from the WhatsApp line you can chat them. So from free registration on your social media page and your phone number, a good number of these businesses have started embracing some form of digitization. So in summary, for small businesses, I think the cost for embracing an online business is the cost of change, the deliberate interest of the business owner, to see reason why they should be online. And I think social media has made it easier. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Babajide. Thank you. Thank you. That was very, very, elaborate. And you touched on a couple of other things I was going to ask, because I know that moving online requires a lot of, it requires some sort of expertise. And you've addressed that portion of it. Thank you so much. Jeremy, I'd like to go straight to you because we need to get done with this session and then this section of the this portion of the edition before we move on to Q&A. Jeremy, could you tell us what's the cost? What's the cost in terms of risk, and then what are the various options that are available? I want you to sort of go a little bit more elaborate, just as Mr. Babajide and Mr. Peter, delved into.
Yeah, so let me start by bringing back to something that Peter said, which I think is really important, is to understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve. I think I'm no tech expert, but I do question sometimes when I see insurers trying to advertise their products through, or having a significant social media presence, or looking for followers on Instagram. I'm not sure who's following an insurance company on Instagram. So I think understanding what the problem is you're trying to solve with digitalization is really the starting point. If you're trying to digitize your processes or operations, what are you trying to solve? And I think the second key part of that is you need to understand your consumers and who they are. And I think that's absolutely critical. I think from the work that we've done, invariably, time and time again, the tech solutions are the easy part. It's how to engage your customers that's the much harder part. And two quick examples. We work with insurers who have been forced in this time, particularly, to think about how they can shift their operation to selling their insurance products through remote engagement with customers. And you often see, even prior to COVID-19, you see insurers developing apps. You see even insurtechs developing apps to try and sell insurance. There's no one in the world who wants to download an app specifically to buy an insurance policy. Hardly anyone wants to buy an insurance policy as it is. So that's not what they've done. There is they find a tech solution and they've tried to find a problem to solve with it, instead of first identifying the problem, understanding how their consumers engage with their products, and then developing a solution that meets those needs. I think similarly and more practically for all SMEs is thinking about payments. So both Peter and Babajide touched on payments, but payments is obviously critical. How you are able to receive payments from there are many tech solutions that enable you to do that, right? Flutterwave, etc. have been mentioned. But how do customers actually prefer to make their payments? And again, this depends who your customers are. But most people across the developing world, including Nigeria, have a strong preference for cash. And so if you're wanting to shift your operations towards online operations, how do you overcome that barrier? How do you overcome the challenge of shifting people away from cash to digital payments? Because the preference for cash is built on quite strong and logical practicalities for the way in which people live. Most people's payments are in cash. So therefore, most of their store of value is within cash. And shifting towards a digital payment is highly onerous. It's quite different when you look at the developed world, where people predominantly live in a digital environment, or not digital environment, but transact primarily through digital through digital channels, and therefore their store value is digital. So again, it's about really, I think, thinking about consumers. And then I think a second point to make here then is, okay, so this trend towards digitalization is, as we've discussed, something that is a trend that we see globally, and it's not something that we can reverse change. It's important that you get on board, and that's the direction things are going. But I think it is important to understand what the implications of that are. So the first is, what are the risks that arise from that shift towards digitalization, right? So first you have cybersecurity risk and data protection risk, which are, for small businesses, are generally things that are not front of mind. And in fact, even for large businesses, they're things that are really hard to quantify and to understand the scope and significance of those risks. You look at the insurance industry, for example, there's pretty limited cybersecurity related policies available, even for large multinational organizations. And those are largely a thumbsuck in terms of actually assessing what the actual risk is. So these are really hard risks to understand, but that doesn't mean that as a business, whether you're a small business or a larger business, you shouldn't be quite deliberate about understanding what those risks are and putting in place mitigation measures against them. I think from the discussions I've been in the last few months, the general consensus seems to be that the next major covariate or multi-country risk that we see globally after this pandemic, by far the most likely candidate is a major cybersecurity event that has implications across the world. So thinking about how you put in place basic governance protocols, put in place basic cybersecurity and data protection mechanisms is really important as you build your data-related infrastructure. So, and many of those things, there's technological aspects here about making sure that you have, passwords and firewalls and all of that type of thing. I'm not a tech expert, but a lot of it actually boils down to the governance procedures. Who has access to different types of data within your business? Who has the ability to access those things? What are the protocols in place that need to be followed in order for someone to access that data? What happens when you need to destroy data? What happens when you need to transfer data between servers or to share it with partners? All of those things need clear processes and governance protocols in place in order to mitigate against those risks. And I think that that's really important to consider, particularly as you grow into this digital space. The last point that I want to make here is around, if we see this general trend toward digitization, so clearly there is major gains to be made. I think it's quite useful, I think, to distinguish between what different aspects of your business you're going to digitize. So digitizing communications is one aspect, and advertising, which Peter spoke about quite eloquently. Digitizing operations has significant benefits from an efficiency perspective in many cases. But I think when we talk about digitization, what we're often seeing is the digitization of entire value chains and marketplaces. So that interface between buyers and sellers is now moving towards an online environment. And that has quite different implications for businesses that are not often or always thought through. So you have these large digital platforms playing an increasingly important role as marketplaces for buyers and sellers to interface, whereas what was previously a physical marketplace is now online. And we see that brings with it significant risks to SMEs, but not just new risks, but also reduces the traditional coping or resilience mechanisms that enterprises traditionally have at their disposal. So an example that's come from some research we've done in Asia recently is we did some research looking at countries in Southeast Asia, so Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and Myanmar, which are developing countries very similar in nature to many African countries. And many of the export-driven SMEs export almost entirely to China. So traditionally, those exports were driven through export associations, or cooperatives. And we know many of the enterprises in Nigeria and other countries on the continent are parts of business associations, parts of cooperatives, whether you're selling domestically or through export channels. But increasingly, with the rise of digital platforms, Alibaba and sales directly to Alibaba in China is increasingly the channel through which those enterprises in those countries are selling and exporting their goods. Now, there's benefits there, right? There's greater ability to access those export channels, greater efficiencies to some extent, but it also means that in this crisis of COVID-19 with the closed borders, it's meant that those enterprises have had less ability to seek recourse and coping mechanisms from the channels they traditionally would have. So traditionally, your export associations would provide some level of support to those enterprises in this event when the borders were closed. Now they're operating individually as individual participants on that platform, and they have very limited recourse mechanisms. And we can see significant failures as a result of that. So I think if you bring this down to the micro level of an individual business owner, it's important to really think about what are the coping mechanisms available to me should some kind of risk occur. The other thing, and linked very much to this example, and that was raised, I think by both Peter and Babajide, is related to the transportation logistics. That is critical. Like, we're talking here about digitizing our provision or digitizing our business. But if you're a goods provider, you still need to get that physical good from yourself to the customer. And so making sure that there's effective logistics, physical logistics infrastructure that enables you to transport those goods is absolutely fundamental. And again, what we've seen in Asia is that the logistics players have, because of the lack of trade over the lockdown period, a significant portion of them have failed entirely, which means that core value chain infrastructure no longer exists. And so even as we see a recovery starting to emerge from COVID-19, or at least a short-term recovery from COVID-19, particularly in terms of reopening of borders and some increased demand from China, there is an inability of those small enterprises to get their goods to China because core value chain infrastructure has failed. So on the one hand, I think for individual enterprises, it's important to be cognizant of this, but it's also important to think about how we can influence and think about this at a systemic level. Government does have a role to play here. So do large institutions that can provide these kind of resilience mechanisms. If we're thinking about resilience of a value chain, or if we're thinking about resilience of SMEs, we need to think about both resilience of the individual enterprises, which means dealing with the risks to you as a personal enterprise, but also thinking about the resilience of the system as a whole. Are there mechanisms we can put in place to ensure that should a large risk like this happen, we can ensure that the systems, the core infrastructure for the value chain remains resilient? So, I mean, that's taken it to a much higher level, but I think it is important in this discussion, particularly as, as a lobby group, for example, of an SME association, thinking about how you engage with governments and other larger entities. Thanks, Cody.
Wow. Thank you so much, Peter. That made a lot of sense. For those of you who don't know, Peter works for a think tank, so they do a lot of research.
Jeremy,
I said Peter, Jeremy. Jeremy works for a think tank, and so a lot of the information is sharing with you are 100% valid. So because they are, they are generated from research, thorough research done. I will let Mr. Peter respond, but before you respond, I'm going to launch a quick poll. So for all our participants, I'm going to be launching a poll right now. I'll let you take some time, and I'll let you take some time in, taking a look at the polls and just submitting your questions. It's just a yes and no, and then just a few options, multiple option questions. All you need to do is just click, 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 and we're done with that. So while I'll be asking Mr. Peter the next question, I'm going to launch the poll. I don't know how hopefully you'll be able to multitask. I'm sure that there are a lot of people in here who can multitask. So I'll launch the poll. So while I'm launching the poll, I'm going to ask a question. Mr. Peter, I want you to also respond, but I don't just want you to respond. I also want you to respond to the issue of, that Jeremy raised regarding, how do we it's pretty much how we transition from brick and mortar to online, because in transitioning, there are several issues that can occur. A lot of people forget the fact that brick and mortar has been here for ages, and you cannot just wipe it out all of a sudden. there might still be some portion of your business that will inculcate, brick and mortar with online tools and online experience. For instance, take for instance Amazon. Amazon has its logistic arm, and at the same time have the online side of things. So you buy something online, it's delivered to your doorstep. It doesn't fly out of a computer and land at your front door. So I want to take a look at that and also look at the downside of digitalization. So I'll let you go while I launch the poll.
Yeah, so it's actually quite easy. It depends on how much you want to digitize. But again, it could just be something very, very simple. Again, the very first stage is just the website, right? You want to first transform your physical space to a virtual space by having a website that shows your products, the description of your products, the cost of your products is the first thing that you need to do, right? Of course, I've mentioned everything around branding, but I'm not going to go back there. So just having a simple website that streamlines all your products and services in a very, very clear-cut way that customers can go and see, call it window shopping or anything you want to call it, but they can actually see your products and services online without having to go to your physical brick and mortar, like you say, building. Now, once a customer comes to your building, next thing they want to do after they've identified something that they want or something that they like is make payments, right? That's the second thing that they want to do. So first of all, you've converted that physical space to something that's virtual. Now, the second stage is accept payments. We've mentioned a lot of payment platforms here. Flutterwave has been mentioned, Paystack has been mentioned, and several others that have been mentioned. Right? That's a very, very simple, straightforward way to just go online. People can see your products and make payments. So you see your product, it might not be all the fanciful things like add to carts and do all of those. It could just be a simple, see your product, click on it, get a link, and then make payment. Then the third thing you want to do after that is to set up your logistics for that. Again, like I've mentioned, you might need to research. I don't know if the company names, but I know that the companies that exist in Lagos that you can actually partner with, so that once a customer has made an order, they can come pick up the item and deliver to the customer's doorstep. So you don't have to worry about having to manage that, because I know what it is to manage drivers or riders and vehicles. It is a nightmare. You're going to find carburetors go missing, tires go missing. You're going to pay a lot of money in fueling. It is a nightmare. You don't want to even do that now, not while you're starting. So you're better off transferring that risk completely, de-risking that to a different company that's going to be handling that. So meet the experts who are already there, partner with them, and then let them have items dispatched from your location to your customer's location, and that's it. So I think that's the very simple, straightforward process to start.
Okay. Thank you so much for that short and straight to the point response. So right now, I'll be taking questions. So once you're done with the polls, please feel free to leave your questions in the what do you call it, in the chat box, and I will go ahead and read it out to our speakers, and they will be able to respond to your questions. There is while I wait for okay, I think there's a question already there in the chat. So somebody says, thank you, Jeremy Gray, your points strike a chord. I am Ogunde Toluwashe, and I recently started working on the Roots Hive. I wasn't in the know of several regulations and policies around several integrations, and it had cost me a rebuild for most of my automation processes and all that. How do you think we can communicate the need to get in the know of these policies in place with younger guys, because I feel no one talks about those stuff? Does that make sense, Jeremy?
I'm assuming in terms of regulations regarding data privacy and cyber and related regulations.
I think,
sorry?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's a I think a common issue, and I think so. Firstly, I think one of the things to be cognizant of here is that regulators are equally struggling to come to terms with this changing world. So when we talk about the risks that are arising from digitization, and particularly with COVID-19 having accelerated that, it's given them even less time to be able to respond. I mean, if you think globally of your Facebooks and Amazons and etc., your broad multilateral platforms, there's very limited governance oversight over them. Increasingly, we are seeing cybersecurity laws and data protection regulations coming into place globally. Last year, with Europe implemented their data protection rules, and across Africa, if I'm not mistaken, I think 23 jurisdictions now have data protection regulations in place. So there are regulations that need to be made aware of. But what's critical here, and this is, I think, the key point, is that as much as there's data protection laws or regulations in place, there are often not data protection regulators in place. So the law may identify a regulator or ask for the creation of a new regulator, but those regulators haven't yet been developed or are in the very early stages of being developed. So they themselves are very, have limited capacity and are challenged in being able to enforce something like this. Secondly, no matter what sector you're operating in, data risk and related risks and the regulations apply to you. So if you're in the financial sector or in the tourism sector, you still have to comply with data protection regulation. That's really challenging for a data protection regulator to enforce. To enforce something that cuts across the entire economy is hugely challenging. And so I think that there's, I'm speaking, we've done quite a lot of work with regulators on this topic and helping them to try and just get to financial regulators specifically in terms of how they work with different regulators in a collaborative fashion. I think for SMEs or people trying to navigate this space, that makes it extremely challenging to try and interpret that and to understand and navigate that tricky pathway. What I would suggest from a practical perspective is that get in touch with regulators. So one of the things that we've worked a lot with on the financial regulator side is to encourage them to be a lot more open to engaging with innovators and tech players. I think that what we see on the financial side, and I can only really speak from the financial sector from this perspective, that they are looking to encourage the development of their sector. It's part of their mandate as a steward of the sector, but they're really concerned about new risks entering. And so how they navigate that trade-off between enabling innovation to enter the market while still ensuring that consumers remain protected is a really challenging balance for the regulator themselves to navigate. And so they typically are quite open to discussions with innovative players who are willing to engage with them. I also know that it's not always that easy to navigate to engage with them. They aren't always that responsive, and it can be quite daunting to try and engage a regulator. But certainly from the discussions that I've had with many regulators, although they're not always that efficient and that responsive, they typically are willing to have that discussion. And so if you're unsure of how to navigate what a particularly tricky space, it is worthwhile trying that as one option to reach out. I think, I'm sure Peter and Babajide can also talk about other channels through which advisors can also help you to navigate those regulations, which are challenging.
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Peter has worked with some regulators before, so he'll be able to respond. And after Mr. Peter responds, I'll let Mr. Babajide talk about financing options, because from his own standpoint, working for a bank. Mr. Peter.
Yes, sorry about that. So yes, I've worked with regulation before. Pretty much worked on so many of the guidelines and policies around data protection and interoperability in government. I'm not exactly sure from the question what regulation he's talking about. It's not very clear. I don't know what Root Hive is. If it could be clearer, I could, maybe provide a better answer to the question, but I'm not exactly sure what type of regulation or which area he's talking about. Well, at least most of the regulation around IT, I am very conversant with because I work pretty much on most of them. So, yeah.
Okay. I just sent him a message. Tolua.
He's financial and information technology.
Oh, financial and information technology. Okay.
Yeah, that's too broad. He's still not specific. So, when it comes to payment platforms in Nigeria, most of the regulations around payment platforms are handled by CBN. So I didn't work on anything CBN. But when it comes to information technology, most of the regulations that we worked in NIDA were quite clear. Willing to give him any documents or anything he would like to ask or he would like to read or inform himself. But if it's generally about regulation, yes. While trying to identify what your product and service is, it is imperative. It's very important to understand every single compliance issue around it, what the law says about it, and what any subsidiary legislation also says about that particular product and where it's actually headed in the next couple of months or years. It's an important thing for any SME to try to understand before they jump into anything. But it's, the thing is most times we try to jump into things because we've seen people doing it without really understanding the nitty-gritty of it. And then we get stuck in the way. I've met a lot of young chaps who have tried to build payment platforms and have not for once tried to understand what regulation CBN has around payment platforms, mobile payments. It's not a very easy thing. You need to do a lot of reading, especially for financials. Not just that, you even want to have someone in that space as part of your co-founder, if at all it's actually even necessary for you to do that in many instances. But yeah, that's something that people need to understand.
Right. Yes. Thank you.
I can add one.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just add one, then I'll talk to Mr. Babajide. Yeah.
Sorry. I'll be really quick, but just to add to that, I think just specifically on that question of financial and technology, I think what we increasingly see is that there are significant gray areas, right? So as you see new technologies entering the financial space, traditional financial regulation isn't well equipped to deal with these new models that are emerging. And so that just to reiterate my point, I know that CBN is not always the most responsive and easy regulator to work with, but they're also trying to understand what the implication of this new technology is. So I would definitely recommend that if you're in the financial space, to be proactive about engaging financial regulators early on to help them get to grips with what is the model, what the implications are. And it's better to do that up front rather than to do all the investment, launch a product or something, and then be pulled up by the regulator later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Babajide, could you respond and also share with us? I purposely left it to the last minute because I know that a lot of people will be running away. So
okay.
Please share with us what are the financial if you're moving online.
What I would simply say is that for every regular business, the options or the finance-based options that do exist are all dependent on the stage at which your business is. So where is your business at? So for example, when we talk about you trying to perhaps access loans, so that's credit. What that means is that you've been in business for at least, in Nigeria, at least 6 months plus. You have some traction. And in addition to traction, you have some verifiable collateral, because that's where we are still at. However, in addition to seeking credit or loan for commercial entities or financial institutions, there are also support-based finances that are provided by multilateral agencies through the government, so sometimes through the Central Bank of Nigeria, sometimes through NISA, which is focused on agriculture, and a couple of these options. But most importantly, I would say that in Nigeria, if it's possible to raise capital from friends and family as you start out, I would say please do so. You need to be resilient. You need to have some level of capacity and capability before I would encourage you to seek credit from a bank or financial institution. Because when you consider the interest rates, can your business stomach the interest rates and you will still be profitable? Those are the questions you need to ask. Like we also discussed with in my world with technology startups, we also advise that you can also seek grants if what you offer provides some form of impact, especially around the 17 SDGs. With adequate research, you are able to access some form of grants. There are also grants for female-founded businesses that you can access. But all this is also dependent on the level of research that our small businesses are willing to take on. Because with these financial accesses and this sort of support, you need some level of research because the information is usually not out there as you would have it. Also, is your business such that you can give some equity in exchange for cash injection? So like in the tech ecosystem, we have different financial-based support metrics that technology startups use. A good and very strong point is usually raising funds in exchange for equity. This might not be too common amongst small and medium-scale enterprises because the business they are doing, the model has been tested. So I want to set up a store, or I'm already running a store, and you need to sort of restock. Then you either go to your bank or you go to friends and family. But to cap it all, what I would say is that for anyone to be credit worthy, or let me say financial support worthy, you must not joke with documentation. So what I mean by this is keeping your books. One of the greatest challenges that small, medium-scale enterprises do have, even when they want to access credit from the bank or even access single-digit credit that may have been provided through multilateral agencies. The problem we see is that a good number of us don't know how to keep our books. So anybody that is going to, sort of give you something, even when it is without collateral, if you are lucky enough, they need to see that you understand your books. So cost of goods, your margin, what is your stock level, what do you actually need the funding for? Because also part of what has made funding very rigid for businesses is the fear of what I would call deliberate abuse of funds. So we have SMEs today, and historically, who want to marry a second or third wife, or their son or daughters want to have a big wedding. They will just package an imaginary credit, and they will pose it to financial supporters as a credit for their businesses. But the intention actually is to get credit for to marry a new wife or to do a wedding. So where I'm going to in essence is that options do exist from credit or debt-based option to equity-based options to grant-based options and to you spending money from your capital. But all you need to be certain is, are your books in order? Do you keep your finance at a state that anyone who wants to give you money will take you seriously and can assess how you intend to repay back, or can truly assess that what you need the funding for is actually what you want to use it for. So that's how I can stop at this point. So if people do have questions that are specific to finance, I may be able to quickly respond to them.
Okay. So we should be wrapping up, and I would like to encourage as many of you that have not taken the polls to quickly do so within the next 2-3 minutes. I'd like to first of all thank you guys for the insights that you've shared with us today. I will also, before I let you go, I'll let you all make quick remarks, maybe like 2 minutes, so that we can wrap up before 4:30. So who would like to go first? I'll leave it to everybody to jump in. I see Jeremy smiling. I see Mr. Peter smiling. Who wants to go first? Mini, mani, mo. Okay, I'll let Mr. Peter go first. You are on mute. You are muted, Mr. Peter. You are muted.
Sorry, you just want me to wrap it up, right?
Yeah.
Just to say a few words.
Yeah.
This was a very nice session. I mean, I'm sure my name is clear on LinkedIn. So if anyone has any personal questions, they can throw that to me. I'm more than willing to respond when necessary. For those going into fintech or any tech space and are worried about regulations around it, you could also, inbox me, and I'm more than willing to help. I can also, just like Jeremy had mentioned, in terms of, having chats with regulators, I probably might be, I can't promise, but I probably might be able to provide, 1 or 2 contact persons, so at least how you can go about, reaching out to some of these people. Truth is that most of the regulators are really open, especially in Nigeria, at least while I was still in there. We're very open to listening and hearing from the public as to how things should be done. And so the reason why the regulators were the ones in charge of it is because agencies like CBN neither have power for subsidiary legislation, meaning that they don't have any further recourse to National Assembly to set up a regulation, a framework. So what it just means is that they can listen to people, get the regulations done, get it gazetted, at the Ministry of the Attorney General of the Federation, and that's a regulation that's bound by law. So yeah, just let me know, and I probably will be able to provide more insights into how this can be done.
Thank you so much, Mr. Peter. Mr. Babajide, then I'll take Jeremy last, if you don't mind.
Okay, so first of all, I think I would like to thank everyone. I've learned a lot from Mr. Peter, Mr. Jeremy, and of course from you, Kayode. So what I would just like to say to wrap it up is that none of us until now have lived through this kind of turbulent era that has been driven by a pestilence, or what I'll refer to as a pandemic like this. So we don't have the complete playbook of how things should be done or how it would be done. But what I can just advise generally is 2 things. Number 1, the era of digitization has come to stay, and there's no gainsay, so we cannot dispute that. Number 2, businesses must now be able to review and access the importance of risk management. So before, it used to be big businesses that used to assess risk management, that used to look at their business continuity models, BCM. So, but now even smaller business need to pay attention to, risk management. So if my business doesn't run for the next 3 months, can I still sort of exist and thrive? Can I still keep my staff going? Can I still have a percentage to even still keep myself going? So these are the realities of the time. For anyone that has some other questions from me, please, you can join me up through LinkedIn, send me a DM, from the institution I represent or I work for most of the time, we are very passionate about small businesses, and I'm particularly very passionate about tech startups because we believe that the future of businesses are going to be driven by tech startups. So thank you, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Babajide. Jeremy, it's your turn. Jeremy, I hope you saw the response to the polls.
Yeah, thanks, Cody. I was actually going to start with that. I think it's just looking at the question on insurance at the end around what are the major challenges with insurance. I think it's really interesting to see the number of responses that relate to insurance policies not designed for my business specific needs. And I think that that's something that we see across different financial products and across different countries, that financial service providers are really not very good, with the greatest of respect, Babajide, at understanding different SMEs and specifically the needs of different SMEs. And I think that's a theme that I think is really relevant to the broader discussion we've had today, which has been great around, the move towards digitalization of different facets of the economy and how we operate as businesses are, it's a trend that is not going to be reversed, and one that we have to think about how to adapt and how to adapt to. But in order to do that, we need effective tools to be able to deal with the new risks that arise and the new implications that arise from that trend towards digitalization. And I think particularly when we think about digitalization of entire value chains, as we discussed earlier, where I think that there are increasingly risks both at the micro and macro level that need to be considered. So I think, my parting message, I think, would be that as small businesses, you do have a voice, firstly, and I think particularly working with associations or within associations or cooperatives, I think it can be, and I suspect will be, an increasingly important mechanism through which we think about building and accessing relevant products, resilience tools, etc. I think one of the challenges for financial service providers, coming back to that, is how do they reach groups of SMEs effectively? They don't design effective products because they can't reach SMEs effectively. Selling on a one-to-one basis does not constitute a sufficient business model for insurers to design tailored products for individual enterprises. They need aggregated groups. So I think associations constitute that and may create an opportunity to make a case for why insurance products or other financial products should be designed and tailored to the specific needs of your business. And digital platforms create an amazing opportunity to do that, because that's a natural aggregation point of many types of businesses with very similar needs and very similar risks that they face, through which financial products can be distributed. But that also requires us to take a really sober view of what the range of risks that arise from this trend are. So being cognizant of the fact that cyber is an increasingly important risk for us to be aware of and to put mitigation measures in, for us to be proactive about how we think about risk management, and to think about what the systemic implications and risks are that arise from the shift towards a digital economy. So yeah, I think I learned a lot from this discussion, so I really appreciate the invitation to participate. And anyone who's interested in our research, you can look at our website at CENFRI.org. And yeah, we're a non-profit organization, so we're happy to engage in discussions with anyone at any time. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Mr. Babajide. Thank you, Mr. Ukonu, Peter. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Like I said, I represent Smith's Work Limited, and Smith's Work Limited is a management consulting firm based here in Lagos. Please feel free to check out our website. It's www.smithsworkltd.com. We help with business advisory, finance, and data analytics. So your business is having growth issues, talk to us. We'll be glad to help you. Thank you so much for this wonderful time. Your emails, your contact details are with us. I will share the recap of this entire session with everyone, including video. Feel free to request if you like to, get a copy of the video. We'll be glad to share an MP4. I think it's an MP4 version. We'll share it with you. Of course, we'll share it with you, Mr. Peter, Mr. Jeremy, and Mr. Babajide. It's been a great time, learning about how to move our businesses online. And we hope that the next edition will be as exciting as this. Thank you, everyone. Do have a lovely weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.